The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
It's Monday, I am solo, and that means it is gambling day. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, we actually have a plan. It's a plan, and it's happening almost weekly right now, and it's almost the same as what I said it was going to be. So anyway, we shall see. Welcome to the show, everybody. This is Fantasy NBA Today. This is season win totals, part 3. They are not the most trafficked shows, but it's something we're going to focus on because I know a lot of you guys are interested in sports betting, and so we're going to hit that up. The plan for the week is tomorrow, Adrian Benjamins, myself, will talk some more Dynasty. We talked a little bit of Dynasty stuff last Tuesday. We got into the results of the Hoop Ball Official Dynasty League number 2. It's the second official Dynasty League. I talked about the first round. It's a 24-team league, so we got through the first 24 picks. This week, we'll probably talk about maybe second and third round, get into that stuff a little bit more, what it all means. I'm sure we'll see some interesting names on that page. Of course, I'll continue to pick Adrian's brain. He is a much more seasoned Dynasty leaguer than yours truly. It's a kind of a fun opportunity for me to just shut down the analyst side of my brain and turn up the show host side of my brain, exclusively show hosting, making somebody else look smart while myself, I am not smart. At least about that subject. I don't want you guys to think that I don't think highly of myself. I do. You have to be in broadcasting. You have to like the sound of your own voice and be a little bit of a narcissist. I am Dan Besbris at Dan Besbris on Twitter. This is, of course, a Hoop Ball presentation. Go to hoop-ball.com. We have big news this week at the Hoob, back at the Hoop Ball HQ. The draft guide will be coming out soon. Most likely, it will be within the next 5 days, ladies and gentlemen, and it'll come, correspondingly, it will come with a fat discount. So stay tuned for that. Follow at Hoopball Fantasy or at Hoopball Tweets. Of course, anything that happens on the draft guide front, you will be seeing it via those Twitter accounts. I'll do my best to retweet that stuff as well, so if you're following me, you should see it too. But like that old, I don't know if you guys remember this silly YouTube, the Washington song. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. That's right, the Hoop Ball Draft Guide. It is en route. By the way, I should mention, while we're previewing that, it is likely to start at a ridiculous discount, as I said. Those of you that got the Draft Guide and Season Pass last year, I think that will be coming with a coupon there as well. And what it includes: the full 8 and 9 category projections, player profiles, team profiles, depth charts, schedule grids, streaming grids, ADP reports, up and down movement of ADP reports, sleepers, busts, risk-reward picks, staff discussions, veteran players, percentages, rookies, second and third year players, second half surge guys, money counters, contract season guys, off-season winners and losers, reaches, minute projections, point league rankings, dynasty and keeper league, auction values, tier reports, punting. It's everything. It's everything. And that's coming, as I mentioned, within the next 5 days. Also, if you're an Android user, you guys remember this from last year, the Roto Balance app will be included in draft guide purchases as well. That's an app developed by a Hoop Ball fellow that can take statistical analysis on thousands of leagues and tell you, as your draft is going, where you're going to rank in different statistical categories with relation to your opposition. It's a pretty amazing app. Unfortunately, it's not available for iPhone yet. That made me sad because, iPhone user over here. And of course, the B150 will be part of the draft guide, but that's not out yet. That'll come later on. As you guys remember, we like to put that out a little bit closer to opening day so it doesn't move the ADPs early. So the Hoop Ball Draft Guide, not long, ladies and gentlemen. As Brewski likes to say these days, hashtag soon. It is soon. Stay tuned for that. Also, the Hoopball Leagues remain open. Sorry, guys. I know there's a bunch of things to talk about at the opener of today's podcast. I promise we'll get into the good stuff in just a moment. Hoopball Leagues continue to fill up. We had the continued trickling of entrants over the weekend. I think we are now... Where are we? We are almost full on our second Cash head-to-head league. The first one filled up very quick. Cash Roto League has been far and away the slowest to fill up, which is funny because it's my favorite kind of league, so maybe I should get in on that. We got 3 head-to-head free leagues that are almost full. We got 2 free Roto leagues. If you guys want in on this stuff, let me know. The Cash leagues are $50. Tweet at me, at Dan Besbris, and at Ball with Neil, one of our other hosts here at Fantasy NBA Today, Neil Rochlani. He is handling placement this season. He'll get in touch with you. Make sure you're following us so Neil can DM with you. We'll just get an email address and then get you linked in to one of those leagues. We're already past, I think now, officially, we're past where we were last season, and it's only August 20th. So a lot of time to go. We'll have a ton of leagues going. It's going to be a lot of fun. Again, $50 and free leagues both available. All right, let's talk sports betting. Again, this will be low on fantasy on today's episode, so if that's what you're tuned in for, sorry. That's how it's going to be until we get through these things. But I have good news. My kid slept in super late today, so before Asher woke up, and I don't know, by the way, I don't know if you guys got to see the video I posted of my kid knocking down like a 9-foot bucket. It's hilarious. It's on Twitter. But before he woke up today, I was able to handicap like 13 of the remaining 22 teams. So I have more than enough to talk about on today's podcast, and I'm probably set for the week with 13 teams. Which means we'll probably finish up with the sports betting stuff on next week's 2 solo shows. That'll be next Monday and next Wednesday, the 27th and 29th. And then as we segue into September, which, makes a lot of sense, then we'll start really getting into the deep fantasy stuff once again. Right now, we're kind of covering a nice cornucopia. It's a smorgasbord here on the pod. We got gambling shows. We got dynasty shows. We got conference ranking shows. We got everything, man. We got all your good stuff. If I'm not mistaken, at the end of our last sports betting pod, which came on Thursday of last week, we were talking about the Denver Nuggets. Which means we're not going to talk about them again. We're going to start with the next team, alphabetically, and that's the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons' number this year is 37.5, and I have beef with Detroit because they were the last team last season to decide whether or not they were going over or under the line, and they went over by a half game on the last day of the regular season. Cost us a chance to go 20-10 on season win totals last year. Just a paltry 19-11, which was still fun, but 20-10. I mean, you get to those nice round numbers, then you really start to look like you know what you're doing. At 39 wins. So why would I go back to the well? I like the under again, by the way, this year, and I like it a decent amount. It's a team that went over. They got to 39 wins. Reggie Jackson missed multiple months. Blake Griffin was traded to the Pistons during the season, and then he missed time. So here's the thing. I am firmly in the camp that believes Blake Griffin made this team worse. And it's not because I don't like Blake Griffin as a basketball player. What I don't like is the way Blake Griffin has transformed his game. To me, it seems like he's hurting himself. And it doesn't seem like he's interested in going back to what was more successful. Blake Griffin was an all-star. 2013-2014 season, he played 80 games that year. The reason I bring that one up is because, number one, it's the last time he's played even close to a full season of NBA basketball. And it's the last time he had a really good field goal percentage. It was actually decent the following year, but it's been steadily declining. And then this last season, just atrocious. And there's been a pretty clear correlation there with him moving farther from the bucket. His 2-point field goal percentage has gotten worse, and I know your thought is, well, does that mean that he's failing to finish at the rim? No, he's still pretty good at the rim. He's just settling for 15, 17, 19-footers. He's taking long twos, which is dumb in and of itself for a guy who should be attacking the bucket. He's also taking a lot of threes. Take a look at the field goal percent breakdown for a guy like Blake Griffin. looking all the way back at that All-Star season 5 years back, 6 years back by the time we get into the next NBA campaign, basically, he was 9 for 17 from the field. That's 53%. He averaged 0.6 three-pointers per game, shot 53.7% from two-point line. Almost all of his shots came from two. This most recent season, and even if you want to go back to the previous year where he wasn't nearly as awful from the field, he shot 49%, so that's already 4 percentage points lower. He averaged 2 three-pointers per game and shot 51.5% from two. This most recent season, half with the Clippers and half with the Pistons, Blake Griffin shot 44% from the field. He took almost 6 three-pointers per game. By the way, 34.5% from downtown, so not great. He shot a career worst 48% from two. Far and away his fewest number of two-pointers attempted, his worst percentage from two, most three-pointers attempted, all of that stuff across the board. Career worsts. Career worst rebounding season for Blake Griffin this year. Career worst in steals. Career worst in blocked shots. And tied his career high in turnovers. Everything about this season was atrocious, with the exception of assists. He averaged 5.8, which was a career high. Blake Griffin is the ultimate popcorn guy from a power forward spot. He will get you points. He will get you some rebounds. Not as many as before, especially not playing alongside, well, it was DeAndre Jordan. Now it's Andre Drummond. And he will get you assists. He'll get you a large number of assists from the forward spot, which is great. But, coming with the other baggage here, it's kind of crummy. So we're talking about fantasy stuff a little bit right now, but it does apply to the reality of what's going on in Detroit, and that is they're trying to change themselves. They brought in a new head coach, Dwayne Casey, who I've done my Dwayne Casey rants before. I watched Raptors games for many seasons because for some reason I always end up with Kyle Lowry, whether I want him or not. He keeps falling to me, and I keep taking him. It worked out finally last year. But I believe that Dwayne Casey had to be smacked in the face with the modern NBA before he allowed the Raptors to grow into it. I'm not sure that I believe he's going to fix things in Detroit. Because I'm not sure I believe that Detroit is good enough to be fixed. That is to say, they have Andre Drummond, who's been excellent, but he's not going to lead an offense. They have Blake Griffin, who maybe used to be able to lead an offense, but at that field goal percentage, and wildly injury-prone. I mean, he's missing 25 to 30 games a year these days. They have Reggie Jackson, another guy who at times can be useful, but also misses a ton of basketball. And then it's just this cavalcade of weirdos. Could Glenn Robinson III grow into something? I suppose. Could Luke Kennard? Maybe. Could Stanley Johnson? I'm not really believing that one. You guys can jam that hype down my throat as many times as you want. I'm not getting into it. The guy on this team that I kind of like is Reggie Bullock, but he's really just a shooter. They're just not that good. I think there's going to be growing pains. I think that the injury stuff is a big deal, and I think Detroit takes a step back. I don't see how they move forward replacing Tobias Harris with Blake Griffin. I know that that's a crazy thing to have. What if we said that 3 years ago? You'd call me totally insane. I believe Tobias Harris has a better positive impact on his basketball team than Blake Griffin does. And I know that there's this, the conception here is that Blake Griffin is a guy who can create his own shot. And in the modern NBA, that's a big deal. Well, yeah, I guess if you're locked into a brutal, tight, slow basketball game down the stretch, you want somebody who can go get a bucket. Most of the time, these days, it's about pace, it's about spacing, it's about passing. You don't want a guy that's just going to go one-on-one every time. You don't want a guy that's committing 3 turnovers. A 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio is probably not good enough for your guy that's doing all the ball handling. And then we don't know. We don't really know what the Pistons are going to do running their offense through big men out on the perimeter, high post stuff with Drummond and Griffin. It racked up a lot of assists, but they need the rest of those guys healthy. I think that other teams are taking steps forward around them, and I don't think Detroit is, so I lean to the under. I think they end up at 36-37 this year. Near miss. The Golden State Warriors, 62.5 and 5 less than last year. There are just so many things that could go wrong with the team that would keep them from hitting 67 or 68 wins. For the best team we've seen in generations, that number of things that could go wrong to keep them from getting to 62 or 63 wins is a little bit shorter. But the big one on this Warriors number, to me, is Steph Curry. And I know I'm not alone in that analysis. In fact, pretty much anybody that's talking about the Warriors is talking about Steph's health. If you believe that the ankle stuff last year was just an anomaly, which seemingly it has been. Remember, he had all those ankle issues, but that's 5-6 years removed now. He had a half decade in there where Steph played almost fully healthy basketball at an MVP level. When he was on the floor for the Warriors this year, they were the same old Warriors team, racking up basically an 80% winning clip. When he was off the floor, they were a very different team. Now, safe to say, some of the games he missed came in conjunction with games that Klay Thompson missed, games that Draymond Green missed, games that Kevin Durant missed. So when there are two guys down, the Warriors are a fairly pedestrian ball club. But they have 4 superstars. I don't think Steph is going to miss a bunch of time this year. I think he's going to be out there, and I think they're going to get there. Problem is, it's as we've said before, it's very hard to rack up this many wins on a team that's as beleaguered as the Warriors, so it's a pretty small lean to the over. That small lean is based largely on the idea that Steph Curry feels slighted, which I know seems insane because all of us here, fantasy players, basketball enthusiasts, basically anybody that's really in tune with the NBA, we're fully aware of how good Steph Curry actually is. But the folks that just tune in for the big moments have seen him take a backseat to Kevin Durant, have seen Steph Curry kind of undressed a little bit in the postseason a couple of times. And I think he's pissed. I think he's pissed that people are talking about his ankle stuff again. They're saying he's injury prone and this is who he is. And he's saying, what are you talking about? I've been fine for 5 years. In fact, the last month and a half he missed was because JaVale McGee blasted him in the knee. So I think Steph Curry comes out this season with a purpose. I think he intends to play through some stuff, even if the Warriors try to stop him. And barring significant ankle stuff, I don't think he's going to let that derail his season. So I believe you're looking at a 72-game or more year out of Steph Curry. My hope is he gets to about 76 or 77, but I would be happy with 74. And I think if he's on the floor for 75 games, the Warriors probably win like 58 or 60 of those because he's crazy freaking good, and then they'd only have to win a handful of the ones he missed. And it would be like a 500 team when he's not on the floor. And I believe they can do that. There's just not a ton of room, obviously, to go over 62.5. There just aren't that many extra games you can win at that point, especially in a pretty dogged Western Conference. But I do think they get to 63 or 64. I think there's a very real chance it happens during the last week of the NBA season. This is not going to be an easy one, but slight lean, very slight lean. Not as zero confidence as my Mavericks bet, but a very slight lean to the Warriors over. And there just isn't a whole lot more. Okay, fine. We can talk about Boogie, I guess. That worries me more than it does make me excited about the Dubs. Working Boogie back in whenever the hell he becomes healthy is going to be a pain. That's going to be a spot where you see a bunch of turnovers. You see him try to do things that he's not accustomed to doing. That actually does worry me a little bit. It's why this is such a tiny lean. But I do think Steph can power this club over that mark. I think Boogie's addition during the regular season is going to be the type of thing that could actually hold them to that 61 or 62 mark, though. It's nice that the Warriors and the Rockets are back-to-back in the NBA alphabet. Houston, 54.5. What? I mean, really, what? 54.5. Guys, this is a team that won 65 games last year. They went way over their mark last season. And their number got adjusted down, even though Chris Paul and James Harden are both still there. Are Trevor Ariza and Luc Mbah a Moute really worth 11 wins? The answer is obviously no. However, right? See what we did there? However, regression to the mean is worth a handful of wins as well. Last season was that Cinderella season for the Houston Rockets. They beat everybody. Mike D'Antoni's genius offense was working in beautiful synchron. Chris Paul missed time early, which was fine. It allowed everybody else to find their way into this thing. James Harden missed a couple of weeks, and that allowed Chris Paul to find his rhythm. Then they figured out how to play together. It was beautiful. PJ Tucker, fired up. Trevor Ariza, fired up. Luc Mbah a Moute, fired up. Clint Capella, time to get paid. Chris Paul, time to get paid. Everybody had everything working for them last year. The Rockets, they had the number 1 seed. They figured, hell, we're winning all these games. Let's go get home court. Well, it's just not going to be that easy. Because last year, the Rockets didn't have a target on their backs. The Warriors did. The Rockets came for teams. Despite all of their winning, no one ever really looked at that team and said, oh, well, this is the championship team. We should be going for them. It didn't happen. And they kept racking up wins with a vastly improved defense, tons of switching. That slowed teams down. It allowed Houston to dictate the pace on basically a nightly basis. And they had, by all accounts, the best season in the NBA. I think that's almost inarguable. Certainly won the most games by a bunch. So 11 wins lower, and yet here we are, staring down the barrel of a 54.5 line, and we like the under. This might be the most nauseating wager on the entire list, and I still like it. Because I believe the loss of their 3-and-D guys changes the way the Rockets are going to be able to play defense this year. Chris Paul does miss time with injury. James Harden generally doesn't, but every year under a belt, you never know. Clint Capella got his money. I don't know that there's going to be a ton more improvement there. They brought in Carmelo Anthony, who, by the way, I think could actually have an okay season for Houston, but defensively, he's going to be a liability. Certainly compared to the guys that left town. They might have no choice but to play more Ryan Anderson, also a massive defensive liability. They don't have much in the way of depth, although I'm sure Rockets fans would argue with me on this. They signed some kind of randos to fill out the roster, like Michael Carter-Williams and James Ennis. Sorry, guys, that's just not a ton of depth. Nene is one of the very few players in the NBA older than me, which means he ain't last in the season. Michael Carter-Williams is terrible. Sorry. And then you got Eric Gordon, who's also now a 10-year NBA vet. He's a Christmas baby, by the way. Eric Gordon, December 25th, 1988. Younger than me. Thank goodness. Most of these guys are. So why go all the way to the under? Why assume a team is going to win 12 fewer games? Well, people are going to be gunning for them now. That changes the way things operate. I think this team realizes that their only real chance to get through the Western Conference and to the NBA Finals, where whoever comes out of the West is going to be a pretty large favorite, I would assume, is to be healthy. So they're going to play it very safe. They're going to make sure that they're in the playoffs. I think they feel pretty comfortable that even at, 54, 55 wins, that's going to get them a top 2 or 3 spot in the West. I don't think they're going to try to win a ton of games down the stretch. There's sort of nothing there for it. I know James Harden basically refuses to sit down, but it's time. I think last year was a really good reminder to this team that they're only going to go as far as their pair of superstars can take them in a key postseason matchup. You need superstar talent at that point. And when Chris Paul went down, the Warriors had that giant edge again. So they need Paul to be healthy come playoff time. They need Harden to be healthy come playoff time. I'm sure the rest of these guys, they'd prefer they be healthy come playoff time. You're going to see missed games from this team. You're going to see other teams gunning for them. You're going to see a tougher Western Conference. I like the under. I don't know what kind of start they get out to. That could make a big deal. The Indiana Pacers, ladies and gentlemen. It's the 4th team we're talking about today. I'm going to try to get through 6 on today's podcast. The Indiana Pacers, the number this year is 47.5. The Pacers last year went way over the total. They were like 32? It was something crazy low, and they won 48 games. And so oddsmakers said, fine, you're a 48-win team. Here, do it again. Your number's 47.5. I am pretty strong to the under on this team. In fact, of all the teams we've covered to this point on our 3 betting days, I think this is probably the one that I like the second most. I think I like the Cavaliers to go over, maybe a tiny bit more because, 30 wins is awfully easy to get to. Well, guess what? 48 wins is hard to get to. Last year, Indiana was that upstart team that nobody saw coming. They racked up a bunch of wins early. They got out to this wild pace. Victor Oladipo established himself as an insane NBA talent. Everything went right on their way to 48 wins. It was perfect. It was this perfect confluence. They played a strong season that graded out well. Like in terms of maximizing your wins, Cleveland was probably one of the best teams at it. Portland, I'd put in that category of teams that won more games than you'd probably have expected. And Indiana, an easy one to throw into that mix. They won way more games than you would have expected last year at 48. Because they're a good team, but they're not a great team. And to get to 50 wins, you have to be a pretty damn good team. I like what they've done. Don't get me wrong. I like the addition of Tyreke Evans. He shores up their bench. He is very Lance Stevenson-esque in that he's likely to do all the things when he has the ball off the bench, but he's obviously way better than Lance Stevenson at almost all of those things. Maybe rebounding? I don't know. Maybe Lance is slightly better. It doesn't matter. Tyreke is so much better. Last year, Darren Collison fit well. Bojan Bogdanovic fit well. Oladipo was great. The only disappointment from last year was Miles Turner, who seemingly didn't take a step forward. One could argue he may have even gotten worse and was pretty banged up most of the season. So there is a universe where the Pacers go over this number, and that universe is one where Miles Turner does make a leap this coming season. If he finally becomes that guy that I think a lot of us were hoping he would be last year, the Pacers could move into the elite teams of the East. But as long as he is an injury-prone kind of shot-blocking specialist who hasn't quite turned the corner to be a more assertive offensive player. I get it. I like him. He's an interesting basketball player, but he's not that assertive on offense. Then this is a team that's going to take them as far as Oladipo can, and last year was about as far as Oladipo can. So if anything goes wrong, I see this team staying under the number. And so to me, that's a fairly safe side to take, where you're like, look, here's 5 factors. If all 5 factors hit, the Pacers go over. But if any one of the 5 doesn't, they go under. Does that mean that there's like an 80% chance you hit this wager? No, not necessarily. But I'd say it's better than 50-50. And if it's better than 52.4, then that's the side we like. I just feel like this team is not going to be a surprise anymore. Statistical regression, teams being aware of what you want to do, all that stuff rolls into a package that says the Pacers are going to have a very difficult time repeating. They played the hell out of their playoff series with LeBron. They were the one team that was like, look, Bron, you go do it. We think we can guard the rest of these guys. And it almost worked. But just take Oladipo by himself in why. By the way, this again does segue a little bit into a fantasy discussion. It's why I don't think I'm taking Oladipo in the first round, even though he was a first-round pick last year. Historically, he's been a little bit dinged up. Not a big time. He generally plays through the little stuff, but he'll miss. Throughout his NBA career, aside from his rookie season, he's missed anywhere from 7 to 15 games per year. He shot 3.5 percentage points better this most recent season than any time before that in his career, while also taking more three-pointers per game, more two-pointers per game, more free throws per game. He did everything more this year and didn't suffer any kind of efficiency gap, which is a testament to what they were doing in Indiana, but also maybe a little bit over his head. Maybe just a tad. I don't know that he's going to shoot 53% from 2 again this coming year. I don't know that he's going to shoot 37% from 3 again this coming year. That was a pretty high mark. What I do think you can expect from Oladipo is elite defensive stats. He's always had that in his game, and the only season where that ducked away for a little bit was in Oklahoma City, where things were just stupid, and he was hurt. He got Westbrooked right out of all of his stuff. So I don't know. To me, I think he takes a tiny step back after that breakout year. Tiny step. I think he's still going to be awesome, but even a tiny step keeps them under 47.5. And finally, we'll wrap it up with one last team, and then we'll split the LA clubs into 2 different shows. The Clippers. Over 35.5. What on earth is Dan talking about here? Why in tarnation? That's right. I said it. Why in tarnation would Dan like the over on a team clearly headed the wrong direction, losing 1 star player per season over the last 2 years, 3 if you count Blake Griffin getting traded mid-season? Why would I expect them to pile up more than 35 wins in the Western Conference? Hell, this is a Clippers team last year that only had 42 wins, and they lost a bunch of guys. And by all accounts, they got 42 wins against some, like the basketball guys, you want to call it that, their better judgment. They played over their heads last season on their way to 42 wins. But here's the thing. They had 42 wins last year, and they were never healthy. And sometimes I get into this weird mode of overthinking things a little bit, where the general public, I think, kind of forgets that the Clippers last year actually could have been even better. I thought the Clippers might actually sneak into the playoffs last season, but to me, the early season injury to Patrick Beverley was everything. It was everything for them. He played 11 games to start the year. That's it. In fact, I believe, if memory serves, he played 10 games, missed 2 weeks, tried to play 1 more, and then they shut him down for the season. That's not to say that having Patrick Beverley out there would have meant they make the playoffs, because as it turned out, it really would have required probably another 4 or 5 wins to get there. And I don't know that Beverley is worth that many by himself, but he's certainly worth a couple. And the way he plays basketball is contagious. The games that he was involved, like Patrick Beverley, he was involved in a Clippers game where they lost by 22 to the Knicks. He wasn't healthy. They lost by 13 to the Spurs when he wasn't healthy. If you take the 9 games when you could argue he actually was probably a little bit healthy, they went 5-4. Losses to the Warriors, the Heat mixed in there. Beat the Lakers, the Jazz, the Mavs, the Blazers. Patrick Beverley is an important piece of what that team does. Also, I realize Danilo Gallinari is never going to be healthy in his NBA career, but I think we can assume he'll usually play more than 21 games. So, take a gander at this Clippers roster now and tell me they're not at that. And tell me they're not horrible. Or tell me they are horrible, depending on what you want to hear. There is a significant downgrade. Make no mistake. There's a big downgrade for the Clippers at the center position. By the way, they also lost their last 4 games last season. Not sure if you guys recall that part. I think they lost 6 of their last 7. They just didn't have the pieces, man. They didn't have the pieces. There was a stretch where they started to get a little bit healthy in the middle of the year. Again, no Pat Beverly. But leading up to the All-Star break, they were playing good basketball. Lou Williams, still a good basketball player. I like Tyrone Wallace, if indeed he ends up back there. I don't know if that's set in stone yet. I'm going to double check on that. Yeah, I don't think that he's officially back. So wipe that one out. Lou Will, Pat Beverly, Tobias Harris, Danilo Gallinari. I like these pieces. Avery Bradley, he should have a bounce-back year. They signed Luke Baumute to play some defense. Is Montrezl Harrell officially locked up? That I don't remember either. Doesn't matter. It will be. If he's not already, he will be. Marcin Gortat, again, that's your pretty big downgrade. The Clippers were able to maximize what they had last season. DeAndre Jordan being gone will cost them a couple of victories, but the health of Pat Beverly and maybe Gallinari could almost make up for that. And this is a team with Steve Ballmer at the helm, working on trying to get them their own spot. They do not want to go into tank mode. You're going to see them playing hard right out of the chute. They don't want to go back to being Los Angeles' redheaded stepchild. They don't want to go into tank mode. They want to keep their fan base and try to build some kind of positive storylines out of a season that could potentially turn up lost. The only thing I'm worried about with this Clippers team, injuries early. If things get off to a really bad beginning, then you might see them throw in the towel. But a team even going 500 basketball for the first month and a half, to me that means they're going to compete all year. And that's a pretty good spot to be in with a wager where they only need to get to within 6 games of the 500 mark. I know, the Western Conference is tough. I'm aware. But they do still play a handful of games against the East. They can rack up wins there. There are definitely teams they're better than in the Western Conference, and there are teams that are better than them that will lose to LA. Clippers have kind of a crummy travel schedule. That was something I did put into the con column here. Get them worn out a little bit. But everybody's a little bit less worn out with the stretched out season. And I think you're going to see a team that's playing upset. They're an angry team that doesn't want to accept their fate as a team on the outside looking in. I think Tobias Harris, as I've said earlier in this same podcast, made them better. His acquisition, shooting the ball better from the field than Blake Griffin, both from 2 and from 3. His rebounding only a tiny bit worse. He averaged 3 assists with the Clippers, more steals than Blake Griffin, more blocks than Blake Griffin, half the turnovers. I mean, this is a guy that improved that team's efficiency, and if they can figure out how to kind of run an offense without slowing it down in the post, they're in pretty good shape. And I think for me, if they're rebounding and they can gang rebound, Patrick Beverly, he's a guy that can get in there in the mix a little bit as well. Some measure of health. You give me 65 games out of Patrick Beverly, you give me 60 games out of Danilo Gallinari, that's a very different team. They should be able to get the mark. We will begin our next podcast with the Los Angeles Lakers. That's a nice tease. Our next betting podcast. That'll likely be coming on Wednesday, as I mentioned tomorrow. Adrian Benjamins and I will talk Dynasty Leagues. We'll get into the weeds on some of the more specific stuff going on. We'll see how that Hoopball Dynasty draft is going. Should be probably done by now. We'll pick and choose. We'll do a little picking and choosing. I am Dan Besbris. Thanks for listening here on Betting Monday. It's Fantasy NBA Today, hoop ball presentation. Make sure to stay tuned. All stuff hoop ball. We got a lot of big things going on, as I mentioned during the outset. The draft guide coming, hashtag, soon. Talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.